Welcome to Your Soul's Therapist, where we explore the deeper layers of healing, self-discovery, and the unseen forces shaping our lives. Today, I have the great honor of welcoming Robert Falconer, a pioneer in internal family systems therapy and a leading voice in bridging psychology and spirituality. With over 5 decades of experience, Robert has dedicated his life to understanding the complexity of human consciousness and the unseen forces that shape our well-being. He's a sought-after international trainer, a gifted teacher, and the author of several influential books, including Many Minds, One Self, co-written with IFS founder Richard Schwartz. His latest book, The Others Within Us, introduces the porosity of the mind, the idea that our consciousness is not a closed system, but deeply interconnected with energies beyond our individual experience. Robert's journey is not just professional, it is deeply personal. Having survived immense childhood trauma, he embarked on a lifelong search for healing, exploring nearly every modality available. But it was IFS therapy that ultimately transformed his life and the lives of countless others. In this conversation, we explore taboo topics many therapists try to avoid: unattached burdens, entities, spirit possession, foreign energies, ancestral burdens, and external influences that profoundly shape our psyche. We discuss why spirituality remains a controversial subject in Western therapy and how Robert's work challenges the materialist worldview that dominates psychology world. Robert's insights are profound, bold, and full of compassion. He approaches even the most difficult subjects with deep care, wisdom, and respect. If you have ever felt like something within you isn't fully yours, or if you're curious about the intersection of therapy, trauma healing, spirituality, this episode is one that you don't want to miss. Let's begin. Robert, welcome to Your Soul's Therapist podcast. Thank you so much for your time and being here today.
It's great to be here.
Robert, can you give us a little bit of an idea of your experience with IFS model, how it impacted your personal journey, your personal healing path for us to have an idea?
Yeah. I come from I think the right word is evil family. Both my parents looked good from the outside, church-going middle class. Both of my parents were addicts. They both molested me sexually, sadistically, lots of beatings. My older brother, also molested me. I was the little kid in the house. Mom was put in mental institutions several times when I was a kid. My brother committed suicide when we were teenagers. My father was murdered a few years later. So by all reasonable explanations, I should be in prison, dead, a junkie, something like that. And I'm not. I'm doing pretty well. I think I'm happier now than I've ever been in my life, and I feel very creative, full of energy and exciting new ideas. And I've gone through pretty much every healing modality I could find, because I was a mess. Would be the technical diagnosis, a mess. And most of the ones that were powerful were parts work models. Systems that recognize that we are made up of parts. We're not one unified thing, and there's the wounded child and all the rest of these. The most respectful and potent of them all has been IFS.
Wow.
And I've studied a lot of them, and we could discuss that in detail if you want. But and so that's the one I've come to, and I pretty much use exclusively now.
Okay, so IFS, an idea of parts work, has been really helpful in your own personal healing process, and then you went on a journey to be a lead trainer. You participated in the trainings, and that's where your journey began to start exploring and opening this whole new doorway from what I understand before that significant moment that happened, and maybe you can just briefly share about it. You were not into spirituality. IFS is already kind of interesting model where we have to accept that there are parts of us, and work with those parts and be comfortable with this. So I would say it's a little bit already spiritual, but how was your level of spirituality before your encounter with unattached burden for the first time?
I realized early on that you don't heal from major trauma without some form of spiritual connection. I That's not popular in therapy land, but I think that's absolutely true. However, because we were a church-going family and my father was a deacon and trustee of a big Presbyterian church, that whole route was poisoned for me. So I studied Jung a great deal and Eastern religions and shamanism. I did a whole bunch of shamanic stuff. So that was my path. But in being a program assistant in some of these trainings, and I've trained many people in IFS now, there's something they call in IFS unattached burdens, which is basically something that's in a person that's not a part of a person. And I'd heard of them, but I'd never really dealt with them. And I felt I was quite comfortable with my trauma-oriented way of working, and I was 60 about, and felt, oh, I'm settled now. And then this woman came in and she had something in her system that was not part of her. And it was a supervision group. It got quite clear it wasn't part of her. I took over the session from the student who was doing it, saying, you haven't been trained in this stuff. And got it out with very little skill, really. And it was strange, though. I didn't want to believe this stuff existed. This is weird. And I just was starting to dismiss it. Oh, this is a one-time, I'll just ignore that, go on with my life, And she started sending me all these emails from the airport on her way home from the training. And I'm seeing colors I've never seen before. I can see the divine in everyone. And I thought, oh no, I've triggered a major manic episode. I'm in trouble. And then she sent me an email that changed my life. She said, Bob, I didn't tell you this, but when I was young, I tried to kill myself many times. And I was locked up in mental hospitals many times. When I tried to tell people about the non-human inside of me back then, they gave me electroshock and injected me full of drugs. You're the first human being to ever believe me, and you have changed my life. And then I thought, I can't shut up about this now, No, I can't ignore that. And I followed her for the 15 years or so since then, and she has really thrived. And she continues to think that getting this, whatever it was, out of her was a life-changing event. And because I was one of the few people who was willing to work with this stuff, I got a lot of referrals. People in the IFS were, oh, it's that weird stuff, send them to Bob, which was really, in terms of learning, it was wonderful.
So today, would you, like that incident, happened during IFS training. So what is interesting about your work, and I'm a huge fan, is to see how you're doing very subtle spiritual healing process with people in a very sophisticated and in a very compassionate, and there is a structure to it, way. And this is something that I've never encountered before. And this bridge between the IFS model, which is a very powerful therapeutic model, and a spiritual healing part of it, this is where you kind of creating this bridge in such a beautiful and accessible and not scary way for clients and students, and hopefully for therapists as well. So
they're the worst.
I know what you're saying, yes. And so would we today can comfortably say that IFS can be a psycho-spiritual modality and a spiritual healing modality that can help us heal on a spiritual level?
I think we can say that. Now, as I was getting ready to publish my book, Dick and the Institute did pretty much everything they could to silence me. And he subsequently has come around and he wrote a foreword to the book, and he's much more open about talking about these unattached burdens and guides, as they call them in IFS. But still, a lot of people are, oh, Bob, weird Bob. He's been in California too long, you know. But that's okay. And I think IFS does provide sort of a back door that allows spirituality into the therapy world. The concept of self in IFS is really a spiritual concept, but it's been dumbed down enough so that it's acceptable to academics.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And on the IFS training, my level 1, we're just students, and someone popped up and said, "Can you speak a little bit about UBs?" UBs. What's that?
Unattached burdens.
Yeah, I was like, what is this? And someone already Googled and posted in the chat, it's unattached burdens, and everyone like, what? And I'm like, and and then of course, like I immediately, I found you. And thank God, our trainer was Lexi Rothman. I know that you're good friends, and she was in such a beautiful way. She took like 20 minutes or half an hour to give us a intro to this without any problem. And it was great how she introduced it, also in a very grounded and a very safe and a beautiful way. So that was very powerful for me to have that experience during my IFS training, because I'm coming from another side. I'm coming from a side of doing psychic work, seeing this energy in people and helping people to remove it. But in a way, how you're doing it, it's even next level of sophistication and beauty, and the whole process is wonderful. But I want to ask you one question: why it is such a big taboo? Why everyone get shrinked immediately when you start bringing spirituality in this therapeutic trainings, in psychotherapeutic trainings? Why people don't want to talk about it? It makes everyone so uncomfortable. And I was so excited, I couldn't stop myself. I think I was writing something in the chat, but I was the only one, just strange person. Why there is stigma? Why we're scared of it in the Western world?
I think materialism is really a religion. There's nothing scientific about materialism. It's a religion, and it's fundamentalistic. These people are zealots. They don't want to hear anything that contradicts their data. And there's lots of areas where there's overwhelming data for stuff that's totally ignored, because it gives the lie to the materialist ideology, the materialist religion. You start taking this unattached burden stuff seriously, for example, materialism falls apart. It has absolutely no explanation. So they ignore the data they don't want to look at. Unfortunately, I think doing this and denying this kind of data is the root cause of the modern epidemic of mental illness. We don't heal unless we form some kind of spiritual connection.
Can you say this again?
This materialist view of denying spirituality, and more specifically denying the porosity of mind, The idea that our minds can receive other spirits, other energies, other input, other information, not through our senses, through other ways. That belief that our mind is like a citadel or fortress, that's the root cause, I believe, of the modern epidemic of mental illness. And we could spend hours. I believe, demonstrate that very convincingly.
Yes. And still, even seeing that, and in your book, you're sharing, and I'm sure that there are a lot of experiences when some therapists would encounter something that is not in the protocol, or encounter something that is beyond the model of classic psychotherapy, but they would shy away, scare away, hide away, and then sometimes a person would be diagnosed with mental illness, right? And that's the problem with that, there is this door that a lot of people afraid to open. And because of that, a lot of people cannot find help.
Yeah, it's worse than not find help. You said something that's so true. People get locked up for this kind of stuff. They get involuntarily committed. They get given drugs they don't want that rot their minds. And, not long ago, hearing a voice could get you locked up as a psychotic and diagnosed as a schizophrenic. Now, fairly recently, there was a study of people who'd been married for 45, 50 years, and one of the spouses had died. 80% of the surviving spouses heard the dead spouse's voice. This is not pathology. It's not weird. It's human normal. And we were locking people up for that, telling them they were psychotic and their brains were broken. That's insane. And
Yeah.
another one that I love just because it's so ironic, Socrates, considered the origin of Western rationalism. He heard voices his whole life, and he based his major life decisions on them. That would be hilarious, except for all the pain that's come from our ignoring this.
Yeah, and I'm still not finding a really concrete answer why there is so much fear. Because like you're saying, it's like a materialism is like a religion, and we choose to be in this religion because, and it seems like there is really some sort of discomfort around accepting the spiritual world, accepting the idea of porosity of the mind, even parts work. Do you have your personal opinion on an idea why there is so much fear around it? Because I guess this is what we are moving into, helping people to move through this fear.
Yeah, I think the materialists have already lost, and it's like an end game. They're being swept out. Max Planck said something wonderful about physics. Physics precedes funeral by funeral. The old guard does not open up to new ideas. They just die off. So I think that's what's going to happen in the field of psychotherapy and related fields. If you've had this rigid materialist worldview, you start opening up to all these other things. It's like the floor has been pulled out from under you. Things you assumed as basic fundamental truths about the nature of the universe, about your own identity, about what sanity is, all that's gone. That's a lot, a lot of people don't want to do that. They're not going to open it like that.
True. Absolutely agree with you. And how important would that be to slowly start bridging these worlds, even a little bit, even slowly? How amazing it would be if more therapists would just become a little bit more comfortable with the other side, with not materialist stuff, with spiritual world and the idea of maybe soul porosity of the mind? And this is my next question to you. It's the first time I heard the term porosity of the mind from your book, The Others Within Us, Internal Family Systems, Porous Mind, and Spirit Possession. And how do you understand this porosity of the mind? Can you
Okay,
give an
I'll
idea?
explain it by what it's not.
Hmm.
Tanya Luhrmann, the great anthropologist, I think one of the wonderful minds on our planet today, she says in the West we have what she calls a citadel model of mind. That we think our mind is contained in this handy, bony little thing up here. Everything in it is private, it's our property, and it constitutes our identity. Now that looks strong, and this is what people won't give up because it looks strong, it looks like a fortress, but actually it's incredibly brittle and therefore very, very weak. This citadel model of mind has only really gotten strong in the past 400 or 500 years, and only among elites in the West. It doesn't even penetrate much of the population. So it's a very narrow band. And this false belief is what causes so much of our mental illness and other difficulties. There's another woman, Isabel Clarke, in England, who doesn't, these two people don't reference each other. Isabel is a inpatient psychologist in locked wards for psychotics. And she says the reason we get such lousy results with psychosis in the West is what she called the billiard ball theory of mind. It's the same idea. If you think your mind is this solid thing, you hear one voice, you flip out, or you have to go on meds, or you think you're crazy, or, and you get terrified because all the authorities are telling you, oh, this means your brain's broken. And then what do we do to people who have these very powerful experiences? And psychotic experiences are often visionary and incredibly emotionally powerful. So if somebody has an experience like that, and instead of offering them compassion, support, a container into which they can put their visions, we say, the most intense and powerful emotional experiences of your life are the product of a broken brain. They're absolutely meaningless.
Right, right.
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I remember when I started introducing IFS model to people I was working with, and they were already ready for anything, right? Because I do spiritual counseling. I just
Mhm.
say what it is, and I'm bringing together different modalities, but it is a spiritual counseling. So I didn't have a problem with people just being open to whatever I'm going to bring to the table. And I brought to the table parts work. And that I will never forget, one person just like opened her eyes, looked at me and said, "What?" And she's like, all my life, I was afraid that I have multiple personality disorder. And you're
Mhm.
telling me this is normal? You're telling me I'm normal? So it was a secret. It was
Mhm.
hidden. I imagine it was really disturbing person from the inside for a long time. That
Mhm.
person couldn't share anything with anyone about that whatsoever, right? Because immediately what you're saying, institutionalized, maybe medicated for life, done, right? Life is over.
Yeah.
So she had to keep the secret until I was like, parts work, this is normal. And I think from that moment, this whole beautiful healing started to happen when that
Mhm.
was just normalized to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a, if we have these experiences, energies or beings or entities or unattached burns, guides, whatever you want to call them, come into people and have big effects on them. If we have a way to help them, to provide a container, a support structure, a validation of this kind of experience, most of these experiences are very positive. If we don't, if we say this means that you're bad, wrong, crazy, the person has to isolate with it, then most of these same experiences become very negative and destructive. It's a lot in the way we receive them. I get a lot of clients now who are psychics, young psychics. And I had one come to me from a small town in the Midwest here in America, a conservative area. She says, I don't even dare tell my therapist. When I go out in the street, I see the dead people as clearly as I see the living ones, and I can hear their conversations, and they're telling me things about the people who are still living. And I validated her. I said, you've got a very dangerous gift, but it is a gift. It's a tremendous gift. And, you know, here's some ways you can help use it. People like you have existed in all cultures, every era of history we have records of. Just that much can really change a person's life.
Absolutely, yes. And I remember being a child, I was going to the balcony, to the corner, and I was talking there to someone. And now I understand that it was my guides, but it was just straightforward for me. I knew I have people who care about me. I talk to them, and they're in the balcony in the corner. And whatever problem I had, I would always go to that place and talk to them. And I always feel that in my life, every step of the way. I just feel that support. I would like to go a little bit deeper with you on the unattached burden, what it is. And yeah, we will drill a little bit deeper and deeper into that. It's exactly what maybe scares people, but I also believe the more we talk about it and normalize it, maybe the less it's just going to be scary and weird, and the more it will be just a normal reality, what we live in, and we'll stop denying and running away from it.
Yep. Well, one way to think of it that helps some people is our bodies are subject. Oops, something fell off the wall. Our bodies are subject to all kinds of parasites. Why wouldn't we expect our mind to be subject to parasites too? Unattached burdens are these energies, or whatever you call them, that are not trying to help you. They're also guides, which are clearly trying to help you. I think the most important thing about unattached burdens is that they only get power by scaring you. When you're no longer scared of them, they lose all power. We don't have to fight them and do this, exorcism and deliverance and battle and spiritual warfare. No, most of them, maybe all, are suffering beings themselves. They're lost, they're starving, and so they attach to someone in an attempt to survive. And we can help them go somewhere where they belong, where they can actually get plenty and thrive. And they're usually happy to be when they find their way home. Now, the spiritists of Brazil, who know a great deal about this stuff, say all of these things are like that. They're all the souls of dead people who got lost and who couldn't go on to the afterworld. Other traditions say, oh, there's all kinds of other energies you could get stuck with. But I don't know. I try to stay radically pragmatic. There's somebody in front of me who's suffering. It's my job to help their suffering. It's not my job to come up with these great big fancy theories, because I can expect to learn in one lifetime what helps relieve suffering, because I get a lot of quick feedback. I don't think I can expect to learn in one lifetime what are the nature of all those things out there. You know, we could talk about that forever and get absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, but just the fact that there is something that is not us can get into you can call it our mind, but it just gets in our system, right? In all of our system. And it's interesting to understand in IFS practice, we look at our parts and we identify that it is unattached burden or an entity or a being or it's a spirit possession by finding out that this is not a part of us, right?
Yeah. There's something else many people have in the West, and I don't think this is the case in other cultures in the world. It just will not accept the idea of an unattached burden. There are also in IFS and in many other traditions something we call legacy burdens, stuff passed down through our ancestors that gets into us and our system and affects us profoundly. Now, there's hard science behind this now. You know, it's really clear with the Holocaust survivors. Grandchildren who never met the people who were in the camps and never had any direct experience have different neurochemistry than people in the general population. Rachel Yehuda at a medical school in New York has shown over 500 peer-reviewed papers. This is hard science. And there's a whole science now of epigenetics. It shows that something weird that happened to an ancestor of yours you might never have met can have profound effects on your emotions, your well-being, your physical health, all this stuff. So we know, and there's hard science, that things that are not part of us and our system and our history can have these kind of effects. Once people accept that, the door's open, and then you can go, well, there's also stuff that has effects on us that we don't know where it came from. It doesn't seem to be our ancestors, but it came from somewhere outside of us. That makes it easier for a lot of people. There is an experiment I could describe to you if you want that usually convinces even the most hardcore rationalist.
Sure, I'm open.
Okay, it's called the Diaz-Ressler experiment, and Ressler's with an R, not a W. Dr. Diaz was a PhD psychologist in Emory University. Ressler was an MD at Harvard Medical School. And Diaz noticed that mental illness and addiction seemed to run in families, and he wondered if there was any other transmission than behavioral transmission. So they designed what I think is a brilliant experiment. They took male rats and they exposed the male rat to this rather pleasant smell. It's sort of like almonds or flowery, a little flowery. And they paired that with electroshock until the male rat had reliably had a startle response every time it smelled this smell. Then they took sperm from the male rat and impregnated a female rat who had never met the male rat and who never had smelled this chemical. When her pups were born, they had the startle response. And when their pups were born, they had the startle response. According to the kind of evolution I was taught in college, this is absolutely impossible. But it happens. And this experiment, because it was so radical, has been replicated many times. And it happens with mice. And I sort of joke, you know, science doesn't seem to care what we can do with people, but if you can do it with rats, it's real.
Yeah, exactly. I have a very real example of my own experience with that. Very long time ago when I was a kid, when for the first time I heard someone speaking German, I had a very strange response in my body. I had a lot of fear and rage at the same time. And I didn't know the history yet at that time. I didn't know anything yet. But the response was so visceral, I felt like I'm overtaken by something. And then that happened multiple times. And then anytime I would hear something about Germany, something about, I cannot even fly today through like Berlin or Frankfurt airports. Wow. I just can't. And there is no way to explain it. I never had any problem with anyone from that country or anything like that. But of course, my grandmother, right? She had a problem there. So I know how it feels really in my body, that experience and full on real feelings and emotions that I know that I don't know how to explain them. But when you look back It makes all sense. And that said, how can we not look at this when we're approaching actually healing process, right? When someone is suffering from nightmares or suffering from any sort of responses and reactions, how can we not take a look and at the ancestral line? So if I would just bring this to the unattached burden idea, from what I'm noticing, also working with people, I'm noticing a few things. It can be really like a lost entity in being and soul. And where I am here in Hong Kong now, it's like it's an intense place, let's put it this way, for this type of energies. I have my home is set up in a way that is going to be kind of making me feel a little bit more safe, because it's just a lot of that here, a lot of healing needed on that level. And before, I lived in Bali for 5 years, and I had multiple experiences just during the night. Something was getting into me. Someone wanted to take over. Something just wanted, my body. And in the state of the dream, I could talk to it. I could tell it to get out, that it's not its place, and all those things. So I have a lot of personal experience of just really random spirits or beings trying to take over, just wanting the body. And then, of course, I mean, I have a lot of people coming to me with this kind of questions, like, what is this? What should I do with this? So there is this one type of UB, like a spirit possession, something, a soul got lost and wants the body. Then there is generational unattached burdens, something that you also mentioned. And I would like you to share a bit more about this different types of unattached burdens that you notice in your practice, because it's not like only a lost soul gets into our space. There's so many ways, and legacy burdens. And it's refined.
The line between legacy burdens and unattached burdens is very vague. I mean, and I just let the client call it whatever they want, because I don't care about what label we use. The line between unattached burdens and past life experiences is also very vague, very similar in many, many ways. There's a experience, an energy from something that's not part of your own personal lifetime that's having a major impact on who you are and how you can be in the world. And we need to help that move on. Many people also insist that there are elemental nature spirits, like you cross the river at the wrong time and you see, all sorts of stuff like that. And I try and rein in my curiosity and focus on how can we help this person help that thing leave. And it doesn't have to be hostile. I mean, when I started doing this, I was often somewhat hostile and forceful. And now I think compassion and gentleness is stronger, quicker, and it doesn't damage the client. I think that, these forceful exorcism deliverance type stuff, it works, but it often leaves the client quite wounded. It's like tearing out a hook in somebody's flesh instead of very carefully backing it out, so.
Yeah, I encountered a very interesting thing that I don't know how to frame that, but I would call it like collective entity or collective unattached burdens. It comes like from cultural experiences, and it's huge. It's like massive things. And what's your experience in that?
Well, now we're getting to the realm that I haven't published about this. And this makes even my published work look, we're getting into weirdness land, but that's okay. I said ask the toughest questions. I've come to believe that somehow there are psychic or psychological seas, reservoirs, swamps, something like that, where huge amounts of human suffering are sort of stored. And for example, There was an IFS training in England. They had many, and they used this same location, which was a hospital that used to be used for cancer patients back before there were any decent treatments for cancer. And all these people were coming out of the trainings at that old hospital with big, weird problems. And I think there was this reservoir of hurt, angry, suffering, miserable spirits stuck in those hospital grounds. And I worked with several people who'd had that experience, and we helped them get them out of their own system. We also helped them sort of drain the reservoir. And I've worked with people, a family whose grandfather, maybe grandfather, great-grandfather, was in the trenches in World War I. And the suffering there was also horrendous. And it was so unified, they were all crammed in those. It also formed this kind of reservoir of pain. And I think some people are susceptible to these, and we can heal those people. And those people sometimes are able to open a drainage way, a stream that allows the whole reservoir, inland sea, to drain. And I've seen that, I've come across this in 3 different people now, the reservoir, or in this case, the ocean of suffering that was caused to all the Black people who were brought over here as slaves. An incredible ocean of suffering and pain. I've even come to believe, and this is just a hypothesis, I don't know this, but I believe that many sorcerers, witch doctors, shamans, whatever you want to call them, have figured out how to use these reservoirs of suffering. And they hose people down with it. And that's how they curse people.
Okay, great. Thank you for making a beautiful transition to another topic. It's not another topic, it's in the same topic, but I'm really trying to go deeper into this world, because I understand that most likely, maybe even more than 50% of healing that can happen is here. Generational burdens, collective, I'm in Hong Kong, right? And I am witnessing every day the burdens of Chinese legacy. My God. And it's like a pandemic that no one talks about. Everyone I can talk to have the same unattached burdens, parts of them that are not parts of them, that are coming from this collective trauma and collective experiences. No one talks about it at all, and it keeps people really stuck, and changes their life, changes who they are. They cannot be themselves. So for me, it's important to open this door, because so much of freedom, spiritual freedom and healing can happen when we start looking at all those things. And you did a really beautiful session, and I was listening it in your book, when a woman spoke about the witch doctors and the curse and what was happening to the kids in the family. It's surreal. It's just surreal what was happening to all these kids, and the fear of her, that this experience is still there. And she has done different ceremonies, she has done different things. And your session was something. It was something.
Just as sort of a footnote to that session, I've stayed in touch with that woman.
Yes.
Her daughter, I had a student of mine see her daughter. Her daughter had one unexplained stillbirth, and my student was doing grief counseling, and then the daughter became pregnant again. And this time, for the first time in more than a generation in that family, a totally healthy birth. And the grandmother says, "It's the happiest baby I've ever seen." And so maybe this work actually did get that curse. The curse these witch doctors put on this family was all your births will be terrible. There'll always be trouble in birthing your family. So it seemed, it's just
So yes, you're following up on these cases when you get to free an unattached burdens, whether that's in a form of curse, generational, just random spirit possession. How do people usually feel after, or what changes? What do they report after?
it varies from nothing to wow, that was life changing, like that first woman I mentioned. Or this woman felt a lot, the one who felt cursed, that her family had all been cursed. She felt better, but she was still very frightened as her daughters were of childbearing age. And, the whole family was, oh no, what's going to happen? Because they'd had all these, birth defects and, kids born with horrible deformities. And so, they're very happy now. I am
Yeah,
too.
I'm very happy to hear that. And I wanted to ask, yeah, if there was any change after that in the family. Is there any way we can self-diagnose that there is something off in our system?
Yeah. If you have some, like, let's say a very typical way these show up is a critical voice that's just mean. I mean, really mean. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. I hate you. You should die. Blah, just like that all the time. Pretty much everybody has a critical part. So the first thing you start asking is you ask about its intention. What's your intention about telling me how stupid I am? Why do you do that? And you'll get some, well, that'll make you feel small. Well, what's good about my feeling small? Well, then this would be a part. Then you won't go out and take risks and get hurt. There's a good intention, even though the method is horrible. This part is trying to do something good. That's probably a part of your system, and you need to help it drop its burdens and come back in and welcome it home. But if it's, oh, I like telling you you're an idiot. Well, what do you like about that? Makes you small. What's good about me being small? Well, then I feel bigger. You know, there's no good intention for you. And very often you have to drill down a lot more than that. And then once you've established that there is no good intention in this, whatever it is for you, you just ask them directly, are you a part of my system? And they lie about everything else, and they will try and avoid this question, often desperately, but they don't seem to be able to point blank lie about this.
Mm-hmm. So if we notice there's like a very harsh energy inside of us, like something always criticizes, diminishes, or
Yeah.
even suggests us to, I don't know, commit a suicide or something like that,
Oh, yeah, that's another common one.
right? We need to understand if it's a part or it's not a part.
And the
Um,
first thing is to check its intention.
yeah.
A lot of times, suicidal parts are actually wonderful parts. I know people go, "You're crazy," but it's true. They're the good ones. Their thing is, if it gets so bad she can't take it, I'm the last line of defense. I'm always here. I can take her out. I can stop her suffering if it becomes absolutely unbearable. That's what I'm here to do. And to me, those parts are sort of heroic.
Yeah, they are. They absolutely are. And I'm curious if there is any other symptoms maybe people have, like strong fear or nightmares, or what's your experience like really drives people to start asking, maybe this is not me, maybe there is something in me that is not the critic, some other
Yeah,
symptoms.
fear is a very, very often a big one. I also work a fair amount with psychedelic assisted therapy. Very often things like this get into people during poorly supervised psychedelic therapy because mind is porous, psychedelic therapy makes it much more porous. It opens up all the gates and lets in the guides and the divine visions, but also this sort of nasty stuff. So very often I've had people, go to do an ayahuasca ceremony, for example, and they come back and they know something's really wrong. So in that case, it's pretty clear something happened in that ayahuasca ceremony. I feel horrible. And usually something got in.
Mm-hmm. And
I'll tell, let me tell a brief story about that. This woman was out here in California and she did an ayahuasca ceremony and knew it wasn't a safe place to do it in, but she did it anyway. Driving home from the ceremony, she doesn't remember what happened. The next thing she remembers, she wakes up in a locked mental institution. Her parents come out from another part of the United States to take her home because she can't function. And on the way home, which was like a 2-day drive, they have to stop and get her locked up 3, 4 more times because she's trying to jump out of the car on the freeway. She's trying to strangle them, really extreme florid psychotic episodes. She gets home and this is still happening to her, but she had I think it was a niece or a cousin who was psychic, and the cousin said to her, just say to this thing, next time it shows up, I have nothing here for you but love, and say that as a mantra over and over again. And the woman did this, and the thing never came back. And she came to me a few weeks later saying, Bob, you're supposed to know something. What in the world happened? And I said, well, seems like, you got opened up in the ayahuasca ceremony and the place wasn't clean. And then I said, these things often seem to be allergic to love. And she thought about that somewhat. She said, I think it was just the recognition that there might be something in me that wasn't part of me. That's what really healed me.
Yeah, exactly. Just the validation that there is something else gave her space to let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that she didn't try and fight it. She let it go with love.
Yeah. And I really love this approach that you're bringing to it. There is so much we got induced from the movies and things like that exorcism is just this nasty, horrible process. And of course, makes people terrified of that and not talk about it and afraid of it. But in a way, you're doing this, you make it in such a human way. And what I was noticing that it's not like you are someone who is dealing with evil, right? And people, therapists that don't want to deal with evil, they send all this nasty, dirty stuff to you. But you're dealing with lost, suffering beings. And it's interesting that in a session, your goal is not only to help the client, but also to help the lost being, whatever it can look like, how nasty, scary it can look like, right? You're doing healing for both.
Yes. Sometimes, most of the time, we can get the entity back to someplace where it can heal. Sometimes it refuses. It's just going to go back to the hell realms. The Brazilians call the hell realms the umbral, which I think is a very nice name. And they seem to have free will. They can't stay in the person once there's no part of the person who wants it at all, but they can go back to the darkness. So I think there is something we could very well call evil. And I forget who said it, but somebody said, the greatest triumph of evil in the modern world is to convince people that it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. So when you're saying evil, like it's really that their intention is very evil and they don't want to heal and they just want to continue where they are. You encounter
Yeah,
that too.
they love inflicting suffering and pain. And they seem to feed on it. There was one writer who called these things the feeders. You know, they maximize human suffering and then they feed on it, feast.
Wow. Then, yeah, I can imagine how important it is for a person who having that experience to be received
Yeah.
by someone who gets it and who's not afraid of it, first and foremost.
And there's sort of an interesting corollary to there being the feeders. Um, it gives me great confidence because people in their parts aren't stupid. And when you point out, hey, there's some external energy attached to you, now notice every time you're close to that external energy, you feel weaker. It's feeding on you. Come over here and attach to the self, the spiritual core of the person. Every time you get close over here, you'll start to feel warmer. You'll start to feel better and stronger. So once that much is there, the part will know. Time is on our side. You know, these things are on their way out. And they often, in my experience, these dark energies do everything they can to make us feel like we got to rush and hurry. And, you know, that old saying, all haste is from the devil. Yeah, you don't have to rush. It actually slows things down if you start rushing.
Yeah, they give this feeling of urgency and yeah, and induce fear. And this is so helpful that you keep reminding everyone that they feed off fear. This is how they get stuck more and more and take more and more power. So the key here is for the therapist to be very confident, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very confident in what they're doing, and also to share that confidence with other parts of the client or the person. So there's this more confidence and sense of being grounded, right? Then it's easier to let it go. And as you spoke to a little bit about ayahuasca and how these things get in, I noticed that in a lot of ways we get those things during traumatic experiences, especially as kids. And I
Mm-hmm.
noticed that as kids, we can get this entity or UB that just helps us to go through our traumatic experience in a certain way. And then
Well,
so many child
yeah,
parts get very attached.
yeah, that's what they claim. They come in when the child feels powerless, saying, here's some power. And sometimes they might actually help for a little while, but then very soon they just turn into they keep the child part feeling weak, so it stays dependent, so they never get free. It's very much like an addiction. You know, an addiction, the first drink feels good, but then it leads to another and another and another, and it destroys the person's life. I think the dynamic and structure of attachment to these the connection to these unattached burdens is very much sort of the archetype of addiction.
Right. And how important it is to do this work of helping those young parts to reattach to oneself or to its own system and
Mm-hmm.
let go this yeah, codependent, let's say, relationship when something is feeding of you and kind of gives you an idea that it protects you and you're stronger. I meet these cases, to be honest, very, very often. And unfortunately, in many cases, people are not ready to let them go. They need them. They want them, they need them, parts are attached.
Yeah, well, then we just have to work with what I do, and this is often the key and hardest part, is offer that part who's attached. I ask the client, how do you feel towards that part? And you have to get them to a place where they're genuinely compassionate for that part which is by working with all their other parts who are mad at it and getting all of them to sit back. And then gently offer some compassion to this part who's trapped. And can they take it in? And very often they can't. They've never experienced compassion in their entire existence. It's scary, weird, and new. So you offer it in more and more subtle, gentle ways. And once these trapped parts can receive compassion, then the hills, everything's rolling in your direction. You know, and one of the things that was developed by Michi Rose like 30, 40 years ago, she calls it the drop technique. She realized that many parts cannot receive compassion. And she said, could you take it in as a few drops on your lips and let us know how it tastes? And with these trapped parts, very often that's too much. So I've been developing even more subtle and gentle ways. Could you offer this part your compassion as a gentle breeze, like after a rainstorm when everything is fresh and new and sweet? And could that part just let the breeze blow across its face? Wow. Sometimes that's still too much. So I've also, could you offer your compassion as warmth? Just a little bit of warmth, and see if it could allow itself to be warmed up a little bit. So, and this is such an important point. It's the turning point of this whole thing of getting these things out in a kind way. Because once that part has tasted human compassion, a relationship with the person's self, they're going to turn. Might be slow, might take a while, but the doorway's opened, you know?
Yes. And thank you for sharing this. I think it's super helpful, and I hope it will support a lot of people who support other people to deal with this. You're giving a lot of wonderful tools, and your extensive research and work in the topic helps so much and gives so much more awareness and confidence, actually, to work in this realm and work with these tools. And what is so wonderful just to see that you bring the IFS model, parts work model, to help people liberate from this very long, very, very big sufferings and burdens that they might carry through generations, through their whole lives. And it's
pass it on to their kids.
Exactly. So it's just such a beautiful, gentle way of working with very heavy weight that you would imagine, okay, we need to go to the mountains, find a shaman, do like 30 hours of this exorcism to get something out. But well, you're doing it right from your home, maybe even on Zoom, right?
Yep,
and just
I do it on Zoom all the time.
Yes. And in very compassionate and very respectful and in such a safe process. And it inspires me so much that we really can do this powerful and important healing work in such a, let's put it away, simple way, in a grounded way.
Humble. I don't have to be some big wise man with a big white beard and robes. No, I can be plain old Bob and do this.
Yeah, you don't need a drum.
No, I've got one. But I don't.
How do you see, just for us to bring this, like, what is the next steps for the healing process, for bridging psychology with spirituality, for therapists, maybe to start considering that there is such a huge realm how they can help other people through opening a little bit to this work that you do? Any words you have for that?
Yeah, I'm working on, I have 3 new books in process. which is the definition of insanity, probably. But one of them is about how to establish a reliable relationship with a guide. And it's a record of my own efforts of doing this and the conversations we've had and how that's worked for me, and some pretty simple ways how other people can do this too. Because I think we have to. I like the 12-step phrase, higher power. We need to develop a living relationship with a higher power. And that's anathema to academics. They don't want to think there is a higher power. They're the world's experts. There's nothing deeper than them. I'm being snotty. Excuse me.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I just want, for people to see how much of a healing, if your intention is to help. I really like this approach that you have. My intention is to relieve person of suffering. That's it. Full stop here. Everything else, I don't care. I just want the person in front of me who is suffering to stop suffering. This is a wonderful approach of a therapist.
Yeah. And it goes back to William James, radical pragmatism. He went so far as to say, what's real is what works. And he didn't care about all those fancy ontological theories and epistemology and all that. If it works, it's real.
Exactly. And are you planning any workshops or trainings for therapists who support people?
Yeah, I have about, I think, 5 or 6 coming up this winter and spring. I hope they're all listed on my website. Somebody does that for me. I'm a computer idiot. And I routinely offer supervision groups. I'll be offering more probably in the spring. And I do those, I do some big ones, more traditional, like 20, 25 people. But the ones I really love doing are limited to 6 or 7 people, so that it's mostly experiential, and I do sessions with each person in the group. So it's 2/3 experiential and then a little bit of didactic. And that feels very, very rewarding, and can actually help people make a big change. So I'm doing all that. I'm writing. I'll be 77 in a couple months. So
wow. What a destiny, what a journey, what a path you took, what a mission in life.
yeah, I feel like so many people talk about having no sense of meaning. And I think you start opening to these worlds, you get a sense of meaning. It might not be the one you wanted, but it will be strong and powerful and clear.
Yeah,
You know,
and it's
I'm quite weird, and I don't like travel anymore. I don't like going to the movies. I don't want to go out to eat. I want to do my work. I want to see my clients. I want to do my groups. I want to do my writing and my research. And my poor wife, she loves to travel. And, she just went to India for a month on her own. Well, she met some friends there, but so, I mean, it's not a life for everybody.
it's so inspiring, to be honest. And I'm sure you've done a good amount of eating out and a good amount of all these things, and now it feels like you're focusing on what's really like your purpose. I guess it just really feels like your purpose. And I really do hope a lot of people will get familiar with your work and with your book, which is such a clear and well-structured way to understand all of this. What is porosity of mind, the different types of traditions, even you give examples of how to work with this energy and things like that. So I hope you have many, 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 many more years to bring this work to us, and hopefully we can take it and move it forward, because maybe there is this time definitely for some kind of transformation. And just really focusing on relieving suffering and clearing these burdens, just helping people to clear burdens of generations.
Hmm. Yeah. I think some things you've said have brought up something I think about a lot. I'm, off here pushing the boundaries and going into new territory. I know I will be wrong about many things I say. They're just going to be wrong. Everybody who doing new stuff, it's like that. I just hope I can be usefully wrong. I can say something which will inspire somebody else to discover what's really going on. And I think that's a more doable goal for me, rather than thinking, oh, I've got to get this theory of all and everything. Nah, that ain't happening.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we do need major changes now, and hopefully they're coming. If we don't kill ourselves as a species first, I think they're coming.
Yes. Yes. And people like you, for me, is like this healers with a capital H,
Oh, thank you.
and I hope many healers will be learning from you. I'm definitely learning from you already a lot, and already bringing into my practice everything I've learned from you, and I hope to continue learning from you. And yeah, I hope we continue this conversation with you.
Okay, me too. Love to talk with you again.
Thank you, Robert.
And if anybody wants to know more or get on the list to be notified about supervisions or trainings, go to my website and subscribe. My supervision groups do tend to sell out in 24 hours, 48 hours. So if you want to do those, you have to be quick on the draw.
This is great to know that there is such a high demand, to be honest. I'm very happy to know that.
Thank you very much, Vlada.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of your Soul's Therapist podcast. I want you to know that I deeply appreciate your willingness to find healing for your soul and add to our collective sanity. If you feel like this podcast offered you something valuable, I invite you to circulate a goodwill back by rating the show and clicking the button follow. If you will share this episode with your friends and family, I will be beyond grateful. My investment of time and energy to create this authentic content is significant, and your input and support can make a huge, huge difference. And before you go, I want to remind you that each of our journeys are unique and truly complex. And my commitment is to look at your soul with clarity, to help you see what you might be blind to see, and gently guide you out of the places where you have been stuck. Whether you're drawn to my intuitive healing sessions or profound depth of counseling, I'm here, ready to accompany you on your path. Go to my website, vladadesousa.com, and choose the best way to work with me one-on-one. May you be blessed.